Promoted podcast. I'm your host, Felicity Fury, CEO and co-founder of We Aspire. And I'm joined by the incredible Renee. Renee, you did say I do a different introduction every time, so we'll see what we get today. You're an incredible speaker, aerospace engineer, pilot. You're doing your internship at NASA right now, which is super, super exciting. Welcome back to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Felicity. Another incredible introduction. I am over in Pasadena at the moment. It is a beautiful day over here. I am actually interning, yes, as you said, at NASA JPL. I've only got 2 weeks left, so we're wrapping up. But it's been a phenomenal life experience, and I'm super excited to bring back all my learnings to Australia in 2 short weeks. How are you, Felicity? What's been
Good.
happening?
Oh, it's been rock and roll, smashing to the end of the year. Lots of programs we're delivering, which is really, really exciting. Traveling around the country, which is a lot of fun. And that actually prompted our topic for today. So this week I was in your town, actually, Renee. You weren't there. I was in Toowoomba and
Eva.
working with a construction company, and we're running a session all around resilient careers. And one of the big themes that we talked about was around feedback. So I thought it'd be a great topic to bring to the podcast today, Renee, and get your perspective on feedback. I know for me, if I have a manager that says to me, let's have a catch up, we'll put some time in the diary, I've got some feedback for you. My instant reaction is like, I'm getting fired. It's like my brain like says that. It's like automatic. I don't even think about it. It's my default of like, it's bad, it's wrong. Like they could be giving me good feedback, but that's my instant reaction. Or when we do a survey of our participants in our program and it's time for me and my business partner to look at the feedback, we kind of had this draw in a breath. Oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible. They're gonna, like, it's so negative for me straight away. And
Wow.
that's just
Yeah.
my instant reaction, which I'm totally aware that happens. And so I have been building a muscle to kind of put that aside. But I often find feedback really tricky giving and receiving it. Renee, what's, first of all, your relationship to feedback? How do you respond when someone might say to you, time for some feedback?
So I can definitely relate to that immediate emotional response where you're like, oh God, what could it be? But then I think I have more of an overwhelming feeling, which is, oh, fantastic. Like I'm going to get feedback that I can now use to do something even better. And I generally think that I'm able to flip it in a really positive way because unless I know that I've done something wrong, uh, which I'm fairly intuitive. I like to trust my judgment. And when I do, or if I do something wrong or something that I would have liked to have responded with better or differently, I generally go and have that conversation of my own volition. I put my hand up and kind of say, hey, I feel as though this situation could have been better. I would have liked to have responded better. I would have liked to have learnt and applied something different in that scenario. Can you help me, understand your takeaway as somebody that either observed or was present in the situation I'm seeking that feedback from. So I like to be on the front foot and really put my hand up because I don't know where it came from, to be honest, but my auntie, when I was living with her, was very big on telling the truth and owning up to when things went wrong. And so I kind of had that philosophy instilled from an early age. And I really find that having integrity and putting your hand up when you have those moments builds trust. So where there may have been a lack of trust in an instance, or somebody, had invested in you and, you deviated from their expectations or whatever it might have been that led to that feedback. I think owning it and really trying to grow from those scenarios is a really great turnaround of something that, you perceive as quite negative at times. So I like to have that positive action that comes with those opportunities. But then if somebody comes to me and says, we need to have a meeting, if it's not like your scheduled annual performance review, for instance, if this is some kind of random feedback session that's come out of nowhere, I would probably feel deep concern, but then I would follow up with, hey, is there anything that I can do to prepare for this session, get as much information as early as possible, and then come in prepared for that conversation, having thought about, hey, I don't want to react emotionally. I want to go in and be as mature as possible in receiving this feedback. And I think it's innate in us as human beings. We always want to have the most positive feedback and criticism given to us. So it's almost just trying to sit and listen and digest any information that comes. And if you feel too overwhelmed to kind of react or respond in the moment appropriately, it's okay to take a few minutes or, ask for a follow-up session where you can respond then after you've had time to think about things. So I try and think about, how do I prepare best for this conversation? How can I go in with best attitude? And how can I prevent myself or slow down my emotional response as much as possible by getting as much information as possible as early as I can before I walk into that scenario. But certainly a bit of an overwhelming feeling for sure. What about you,
Yeah.
Felicity? What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed over time throughout my career. Certainly early on, I was a lot more self-conscious about myself and, even in my abilities, and I was still trying to figure things out. And if I think back to an early experience I had, I remember I was sitting at my desk and I hung up the phone, and the guy sitting next to me said, "Hey, do you know when you speak, your voice goes up at the end and you kind of have this high-pitched tone?" And he kind of was alluding to maybe I should lower my tone to be taken more seriously. Now, first of all, that pissed me
Wow.
off. I was so annoyed at this person. And I think one piece of the puzzle in this feedback, you know, topic we're talking about today is about the person who is giving you feedback. So he was a colleague. I mean, he was kind of like okay at his job. He wasn't, the best in the team. And so I think a lot of this comes down to the relationship of the person that's giving you feedback. If it's someone who is one of my mentors, a CEO who I deeply respect, or it's someone who I really want to be like one of my coaches that I've got at the moment, who's an entrepreneur, an incredible entrepreneur. I really respect them. So I think a lot more open to receiving that feedback. At the time, I was
Mm.
like, F you, you, mm-mm. And so I was pissed about it. And I actually did for a number of years try to lower my voice in the context of being a female in engineering, thought maybe that might be more helpful, or I
Ugh,
kind of speak with more authority,
deeply
which is
upsetting that
why
you tried to change that.
I know, right?
Ugh,
And then
yes.
fast forward, like maybe 10 years later, I'm at a 2-day boot camp and we're in beautiful Kangaroo Valley, which we've been to together, Renee, so you know how stunning it is there. And we were doing pitching about our business. And there was a lady there, another amazing entrepreneur. Her name's Erica. And I pitched and I said, I really want to improve. What's your feedback? And she said, actually, like the presentation was great. There was nothing really I'd add to your pitch. You were doing a great job. You came across really confidently. And she said, one thing I think you could look at working on is your voice. And I was in that moment, actually, it was a totally different response. And I thought, that's so curious. She's someone I really respect. That would be interesting. I wonder if I did change it or go to work on that, maybe that could make a difference. So I actually ended up doing singing lessons for 2 years, and it was so fascinating. As a
Wow.
total side note, what I learned. And actually, by dropping my voice, I was ruining my vocal cords, and it was actually really, really bad to be, trying to lower my voice in that way. And what I worked on with my singing coach is, yes, I do have a naturally higher pitched voice. Apparently, lots of people want that. So I was like, okay, great. I can flip that into a positive. And she told me a lot of breathing techniques where I could actually use my breathing to have my voice resonate more, to actually make it sound more powerful, even though it was a higher pitch. But I thought it was quite interesting where I'd basically been given feedback on something very personal, like your voice, and had
Mm.
totally different responses because of the relationship that I had, but also the context of wanting to improve because I really wanted to do a good job. So I think those things are really important when we're talking about feedback. Have you got anything like that that's happened to you, Renee?
Oh gosh, I receive feedback, but I had it from somebody who I didn't respect, and it also was delivered in such an emotional way that it was very easy for me to almost switch off as they were giving me this feedback.
Mm.
So I had called in a colleague of mine to give them feedback actually. And I gave them the heads up, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. I had a little bit of feedback on one of our previous meetings. Could we catch up for 10 minutes and have a quick conversation? So I kind of gave them the heads up. They got the call to say there's feedback coming. I walked in and I was like, hey, listen, I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is kind of what unfolded, and this is what you said, and this is how it made me feel. This is what I kind of expected in that scenario. And without even really listening to the feedback I had, this person then just started giving me feedback in response, and it was complete defense mechanism. You're a poor communicator. You've upset this person. You've done this wrong. Like 4 or 5 things I was given in response to me giving feedback. And the context of that as well was, I think 6 to 8 weeks earlier, I'd had my annual performance review where I was given 100% of my bonus and told how great I was doing. And because of the scenario that played out and me giving this person feedback, they just weren't ready for it. I don't think that they were in the right frame of mind, whatever it was, but it was crazy to then receive so much feedback in such an emotional setting for them.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, in that situation, uh, we kind of had to call the conversation off because the response was just so poor and we weren't getting anywhere. And then came back and kind of met up a couple of hours later. And again, their approach in that second meeting was so much more relaxed, professional, and to the point. But I'd already had enough moments prior to that feedback scenario with this person that I already didn't really respect them. So
Mm.
walking into that and then having that feedback given to me, if anything, it made me feel as though this person felt insecure. They felt potentially threatened by me. And I was more junior than this person too. And so I think, I had never been in that situation before because I have been fortunate enough to always have incredible managers and people that I've always respected. So in this scenario, it was very different. But in my personal life, I've had enough people that have tried to treat me poorly in the past that I was very cognizant of what was actually happening here. And it wasn't a reflection of my performance at all. It was a reflection of where they were at. So,
Totally.
yeah, I mean, feedback is a really interesting thing to give and receive. And I think that in order for it to be the most defenseless, easy, unemotional, professional conversation, you really have to go in prepared. You have to give people time to prepare. And be really clear on what you want to go through, I think, so that people can really
Mm.
go in and understand that, okay, we're going to have this conversation and I need to have XYZ ready to go. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the most intense feedback sessions I've had. I learned a lot from it. And my takeaways were really don't meet people if they're kind of getting to that more emotional state. Just try and remain calm, remain professional, be respectful, allow people to walk away from with their dignity, which isn't always easy in the moment, but certainly something
Mm.
that you can reflect on in
Yes.
preparation for these things.
Yeah, I think it can be a really delicate conversation. And the things that have helped me with receiving and giving feedback have been thinking about the context, that relationship, and also what's a filter that I'm listening to this through. So the filter might be I'm really actually wanting to improve and go work on myself. That's a positive filter. Or it could be I'm really scared I'm going to lose my job. Oh my gosh, super negative. And they might even be trying to give me positive feedback, but if I've got that filter that I'm listening through, then it can totally change what I'm hearing. And it really stood out for me a few months ago. We ran a workshop with some incredible women in construction, and a couple of the people in the program have been professional athletes. And so we asked them, what's your relationship to feedback? And they said, well, in the context of sport, I'm hungry for it. I crave feedback
Mm.
because it helps them improve and be better athletes. And I think when we look at something like sports, it makes a lot of sense because that's kind of the context that you're in. You're training, you're developing yourself as an athlete, you're improving, you're wanting to go work on something. And then in the context of work, it can be a bit more gray and it can feel a bit more personal. And I often think about it like they're giving you feedback on, say, your behaviors, not you as a person. So I think when we can uncouple those two things as well, going there's the person and then there's the behavior, that can help me see anyway that okay, it might be they're talking about my behavior, not me as a person. In that situation, I might have behaved in that specific way. And I think when we're kind of really taking that step back, it can help us actually have the feedback be positive. Or, like you said, Renee, I think there's a great quote that I often refer to, which is says more about them than it does about you. If it is a tricky situation, then it might be that they're having a reaction to something that you're doing, and it might not actually be a reflection on you. So I think taking that step back and looking at is it to do with me? Is it to do with them? And taking that space and time, I think is really powerful, like you suggested, Renee.
Yeah, I agree. And you're just kind of giving me the opportunity to reflect on my own experience and giving feedback as well to my team members in the past. I've had some performance reviews that have been incredibly positive, and then some that have been really challenging to navigate because you can see intent is really there. People are trying to learn, but then sometimes they're not kind of meeting those expectations. But again, it takes transparency and it also takes picking things up as they happen as well, so that
Mm,
when you're coming to those kind of performance reviews and opportunities to give formal feedback, you're not surprising people as well with
mm,
things that could have been corrected much earlier on. And I think, like anyone, they want the opportunity to try and correct things. So if you're not meeting expectations, you want to know as soon as possible. In those more difficult conversations, I think I've always taken the approach that you want to give reinforcement that, they've done a great job. Here's what they're succeeding at. Here's what needs improvement. And here's how I'm going to help you get there. And I think that is
mm,
a huge differentiator in the way that people can then digest that feedback where there is improvement required. If you know that your manager has your back and you're going to, set up a plan and you're going to have a process on how you can improve those things, and you have that transparent conversation where you figure out what's going to work best for both of you.
mm,
I think that really goes to show that you're giving this person the time and space to reflect on the feedback, but you're also allowing them to have a contribution to how they're going to improve, and you allow them to walk away with their dignity intact because they're not less than or they're not lesser as a result of not meeting your
mm,
expectations in every way. And to be quite frank, I think that we all have teams that, have complementary skill sets. So not everyone's going to be the top data analyst or the top reporter or the top presenter. So how do you curate this person's experience to help them build in their areas of improvement or where their ambitions lie outside of their skill set? So it's certainly a tricky space, and I think that for me personally, thinking about feedback, I am one of the athletes in this scenario. I really crave feedback. And I really crave it from the people I really respect. So feedback's something I seek actually fairly often in my life. I called a mentor last week because I had a bit of a fork scenario, a decision, a fork in the road where I, was trying to figure out, do I go left, do I go right? Here's what's happening in my life. And just playing back that scenario to my mentor, he was able to turn around to me and say, here's what I think is going on for you. Here's where I think you need to slow down a bit. Here's where I think you need to simplify the way you're thinking. Here's, the scenario where I think you can achieve both of those things and you don't have to make a choice. So it's incredible to have a safe space that you can go to with someone and they know you so authentically. They know that maybe you're an overthinker or that you get triggered and traumatized by certain things, or, they have enough perspective on your life experience to know why you're what your stresses or your, positive kind of skills or experience will lead you down. So that for me has always been incredibly beneficial because the more and more I speak about mentors, I know we're speaking about feedback today, but mentors aren't as common as I thought they were. And I know, Felicity, you and I are huge advocates for having people, coaches, support systems and networks around us. These are the people that we need to be seeking feedback from because it's a safe place to then really be able to go in, as you kind of suggested earlier, when you receive the feedback from the person you respected, you were so open to it. And so I think that that's the beauty in having those people around is, they're giving you feedback that you can really grow
Mm.
from.
Yeah. And I think these are all clues, right? If you're listening to this going, oh, I couldn't imagine having a safe conversation like that with my manager, or I couldn't imagine having that with my boss's boss, then maybe that's a clue that actually there isn't a safe space for feedback, that maybe they don't really understand yourself. Maybe you don't understand yourself. I know, I've had a really big breakthrough for myself this week around understanding myself better, which will be on another episode of the podcast. And so there's some really, really helpful clues. And I think if I loved your example, Renee, about your manager helping be your guide through, okay, this isn't working. Here's some feedback on that. It's a learning process. Let's do this together. Amazing. Like I haven't, I've had a few bosses that have done that, but certainly not all of them. And I would have loved that support. And if they're a good leader, they know that developing that next generation of their team is really important. It is really powerful. And actually, in the long term, makes their job easier. And I think there are a lot of leaders out there who are more short-sighted. They're more kind of managing the day-to-day and not thinking about that longer term big picture. So these could be clues about the environment that you have around you. Potentially, not saying you need to change your role or change your manager. There are other ways to get that, which I've certainly found, like getting mentors, like you mentioned, Renee, has been a really big part of my journey as a leader. So I hope this conversation has been helpful on feedback. I think really thinking about the context, seeking first to understand is another really powerful mantra to think about when you're looking at feedback, whether it's for yourself or for others. So I hope this conversation has helped you. Renee, any final tips before we wrap this episode?
No, I think you've summarized that perfectly. As always, we're here to help you get promoted and be great when you get there. We look forward to seeing you in the next session.
And send us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. We are open to feedback. Send it our way. We'll see you in the next episode.
I love it. Thank you.